Right, so in this one, we're going to be going through another of the application videos for all the different medical schools in the country for postgraduate entry into effectively to the Doctor of Medicine programs. I will be applying to every single one of them, at least that I can this year. And so in my research, I'm then turning them into videos to kind of help people break down all the different processes at every single uni. Today, what we're going to be doing is going through a combined one for the University of Notre Dame, or is it Notre Dame? I actually don't know out of the two which it is. I'll say Notre Dame, that's what I hear everyone else saying. I have no idea. But they've got two campuses. There's one in Fremantle in WA, and there's another one in Sydney in New South Wales as well. I'm going to be doing them combined. I've done my research and realized the process is pretty much completely the same. The only difference is their intake numbers. So we'll combine them. If you're looking to apply to either of them, then this will be the video for you. The other thing is as well that it's a portfolio uni. So it still follows GEMSAS, but it also has a fourth component, which is the written portfolio. And this takes into consideration kind of life experience, leadership skills, and this kind of thing as well. And it can offset some of the impact of GAMSAT, GPA, and interview. So same as the other ones, because it's another GEMSAS school, I'm only going to be really highlighting the things that are actually unique to Notre Dame rather than going through the entire GEMSAS process. As I always say, if you've already seen the UniMelb one, which I did late last year, check that one out. And I go into a bit more detail because that was the first GEMSAS school that I actually did a video on. But otherwise, all the information is in the GEMSAS admissions guide, and I'll link that down below as well, along with some other links. Keep in mind that this is all based on the 2022 entry data. We don't have the admissions guide for 2023 yet. It's subject to change, but we wouldn't expect it to be massive or catastrophic changes at all either. And then same thing as well, there's going to be a few little specifics and things like that that I might gloss over because they're a bit more minute or a little bit more niche to do with different degrees and that kind of thing. So if you're unsure, it's best to always check with the uni, contact them, or you can also contact GEMSAS for clarification as well. So first of all, we're going to go through the place types as we always do. So at the Fremantle campus, there are 100 total places. At the Sydney campus, there's 120. To break things down though, at the Fremantle, there are 71 CSP places and then 29 bonded places. There are no domestic full fee, and there's also no international places either. So this makes up the total 100. At the Sydney campus, they have 43 CSP, 17 bonded, and then up to 60 domestic full fee places. And again, there's no international places at the Sydney campus either. When you actually apply, you'll need to tick a box for which type of place you actually like to be considered for. You'll only be considered for a place if you tick the box for it. They still follow a preferencing system, so they will allocate places. They'll allocate the CSP places first, then the bonded, and then the full fee if there are any. So at Sydney, for example. So if you only tick one, it means that you're decreasing your likelihood as well. Unless you're like ranked number one, you don't have to worry about it. Depending on what you're able to do, the more boxes you tick, the more chances you have at a particular place. The other thing is, although they do have two campuses, they very rarely actually accept transfers between the campus. They say that the only way to actually transfer an offer between either campus is if you can prove that you can commit to the entirety of the degree at the campus you'd like to transfer to, then they may take it into consideration. But that effectively means you'd be asking for a transfer before the degree starts. If you're already partway through and then you want to switch, it doesn't look to be possible. So first of all, I'm going to go through selection requirements. I normally do the minimum requirements, but I realized that given that really we don't often have much data on competitive scores or anything, it makes more sense just to do that rather than have selection criteria if we don't really know what the numbers are. So in terms of selection requirements, I'll bundle the two together now. We've got the portfolio is one of the biggest differences with Notre Dame, either of their campuses. This is where you'll kind of put in things like your personal qualities, your leadership skills, volunteer work, work experience, life experience. All these things get factored in. The other one then obviously is GAMSAT, which you're already familiar with. Notre Dame use the unweighted overall GAMSAT score, and they have a minimum of 52 as a requirement as the overall unweighted score. So the three sections added up divided by 3. In terms of GPA, they have a minimum of 5.4. They follow the GEMSAS calculations as well. They do the ×3, ×2, and ×1 weighting. So there's no differences there. Then these three things will be used to rank people for interview offers. And then from there, the interviews get bundled in, and then your interview performance also gets factored in along with the other three criteria for a final selection. So breaking down eligible degrees. They do have quite a few stipulations on different degrees. Most of you will probably be going down the pretty mainstream pathway, and that is completing a 3 years full-time equivalent bachelor's degree or at an AQF level 7. If you don't have that though, or you've got some additional study, there may be other degrees that qualify. So the first one is if you've done a combined undergrad and master's program. So not two separate ones where you've kind of graduated from one and then gone into another, but if your graduation is literally waiting until you've finished both because you went into the undergrad with a package deal of both combined undergrad and masters, then what there needs to be is you need to have done a minimum of 2 years at undergrad level and a minimum of 1 year at postgrad level to make up those 3 years full-time equivalent for that degree to qualify as an eligible degree to apply. The other thing is that that degree, just like an undergrad, has to have been completed by the 31st of December in the application year. So if you're applying this year, you would need to also have completed those 3 years of study, and the entire program actually would need to also be completed by the 31st of December this year. So if you've done an accelerated program or an accelerated degree, this is where you would have done 3 trimesters per year for 2 years to get effectively a 3-year degree done in 2 years. This still qualifies, but same thing, it must be completed by the 31st of December in the application year, so by the end of this year effectively, if that applies to you. And then conversion degrees, these are a lot shorter. So in order for your conversion degree to be eligible, you need to have either completed a preceding diploma, or you must also have that followed up by a minimum of 1 year's full-time equivalent in some kind of postgrad studies after the conversion degree. Same thing, that also has to have already been completed in order for it to qualify. And then finally, if you don't really fit into any of those piles, but you do have at least 3 years full-time equivalent at AQF level 7, so that is a bachelor's standard, but you might have an overseas degree or something like that, then it needs to have been 3 full-time equivalent years. They need to have already been completed at the time of application. And they also need to be studies in either one single discipline or at least in very closely related disciplines. So next up then is how do they calculate GPA? So again, it follows the GEMSAS process, so I'm not going to go into the detail on that. They follow hard and fast the 3 most recent years, even if that's crossing over 2 different programs. So this can include an honours year. So if you've done a 3-year undergrad and then also done a 1-year honours as well, then it would be your honours year as your final year of study, and then your 3rd and 2nd year as your other 2, making up the most recent 3 years, and that would go in. Most of you will just be completing a standard 3-year degree. Those 3 years count. The weightings all apply just like any other GEMSAS school. If you do have postgrad studies that's included in that 3 years full-time equivalent, then those studies need to have been completed by the 31st of July in the application year. And then finally, just some exclusions to the postgrad thing. So masters by research, PhDs, or any kind of clinical or professional honours are actually excluded from consideration for the GPA calculation. But if you've done a master's by research or a PhD program, you actually get awarded a bonus in the portfolio process as well. Actually, we'll come back to that in a moment. So then currency of degree, they still follow a 10-year rule, but they apply it slightly differently. So basically the degree that you're using to qualify has to have been completed within 10 years of the end of the application cycle. So if you're applying for 2023 entry, then your undergrad or the degree that you're using needs to have been completed after May 31st of 2012, 10 years before the end of the application window in 2022 for 2023 entry. Hopefully that's not too confusing. And then there are also, in the applications guide, they go through a lot of different scenarios where you can have some kind of exceptions to the rule, but I won't bore you with all the details there. I'll link that below and you can kind of search that up and check that through if it applies to you. So then application process, really no different from any other GEMSAS school outside of the portfolio. So you'll still apply through GEMSAS. The portfolio is embedded in that. So if you tick Notre Dame or either of their campuses or both, it'll automatically put the portfolio process in, and then you'll fill it all in through the GEMSAS application. That's made up of 2 parts. So there's a personal statement. After that, then there's the portfolio section, and it's a series of demonstrations of your personal qualities and your life experience. It talks about like leadership. There's actually a template on the website, which I'll link below as well. I had a quick look through that because obviously I'll be applying and I was interested to see what kind of stuff actually gets included, what stuff I might have as relevant in my own application. And so they're effectively looking for, leadership skills, dedication to community, awareness of they call them the objects of the uni, but effectively like their objectives in what they're trying to achieve with the program, which includes things like pastoral care and that kind of thing, because it's also a Catholic institution as well. So they're looking to make sure that you effectively match to the profile of the uni at the same time, and that you have skills that are relevant, so they're not just completely basing it on academic abilities. I think that's a really good thing, because I don't think that, although you have to obviously be quite intelligent to be a doctor and stuff as well as that it is very much a people's job. You're working with people, so interpersonal skills and a dedication to community is actually a really good inclusion, I think. It'd be nice to see more unis include these kind of portfolio systems. It probably just slows down their admin more than anything. Yeah, so they ask obviously all your personal details, contact information, and so on. It's almost like a job application, just with a little bit more detail thrown in. And so they ask about, as you can give lots and lots of examples of like leadership experience, and it talks about, it gives examples, and it says maybe you've been a leader in your local community group, in a sports team, in the workforce, and that kind of thing as well. It even includes like teaching or tutoring a class or a group. So like for me, for example, I should have quite a few. Like obviously I run a business, so my whole job is being a leader, and I lead a team of employees, and I've worked through that, so I've probably got plenty to say there. Yeah, I did a whole bunch of volunteer work while I was at uni for about 5 years or so, with a few different student-led charity groups, and I was managing a few projects, and a lot of it was education-based. It included teaching in classes, working with schools across the state. So there's a lot of leadership there as well. I was training tutors, managing teams, and then also running the finances of it as well. So I'll probably definitely include that in there as well. And then it also talks about your involvement in local community. So I think I'll probably split my work from my volunteer work. That seems to be the two main things. And then right at the end, have you ever been convicted of a criminal offence? Hopefully no one's ticking yes to that, but they ask just about everything in there. But yeah, so that's an interesting one, because I think I'll have quite a few things to put in my own application. Hopefully you've got the same for yours. The next thing is part of the application process. They do have a WA residency scheme for the Fremantle campus. And it says that if you can prove that you've been a WA resident for more than 10 years up to the time of application, then they'll also take this into consideration. They don't actually say what that means, but it may mean that there's a slight preferencing towards local students or WA residents. And so if you are a WA resident, it slightly boosts your chances, by the sounds of it, at the Fremantle campus. Then Indigenous and rural applicants, I won't go through details on those because it's the same as every other GEMSAS school. The basics are, for Indigenous students, they say apply through GEMSAS. There's a box to tick there, but you can also contact the university directly, and they should have a direct entry process as well. It doesn't say whether or not you don't need a GAMSAT result for that, but all the other unis, whenever they had an Indigenous pathway, whenever you apply directly to the uni, they actually often scrap the GAMSAT score entirely from consideration. Whereas if you go through GEMSAS, you'll still need to meet all the minimum requirements for GAMSAT score. And then for rural applicants, all of the same thing about living in an RA2 to RA5 region for a set period of time, 5 years consecutively or 10 years cumulatively, still applies. For interviews, they do an MMI. It looks like they do 5 MMIs. They said that they selected around about 200 people for 2022 entry. So although they have an intake of 100 at Fremantle, they doubled their interview spots and then cut it back down to half. At Sydney, they have an interview number of about 300, and then they cut that down to about 120. So a little bit of a stricter cut down at Sydney. Not too sure why that is, probably down to the demand for the campus. The other thing that I've heard as well is a bit off topic, but the other thing that I've been told is that if you go through UNDS, they do have clinical schools in Victoria, which means that you could only do the first 2 years of preclinical in Sydney on campus, and you could potentially then be in Victoria for the 2 clinical rotational years for years 3 and 4. And that's something that I'm really looking at, because obviously I'm in Melbourne, I'm looking at relocating to Sydney for Sydney Uni, but I'm also open to relocating anywhere in the country. But it would be kind of nice to only have to do a 2-year commitment. And that would also mean as well that then you would be eligible to do your internship year in, or your intern year in the same jurisdiction, which would mean that compared to, say, a minimum 5-year commitment for myself at least, moving interstate, it could just mean a 2-year commitment while I'm at uni and then come back to Melbourne for the remaining 2 years and then start my career in Melbourne as well. So that's something to consider if you are a Victorian, you're looking at that. there's a slight advantage there. And then in terms of offers, we mentioned before, so interviews are going to be based on a combined rank between GPA, portfolio, and GEMSAS score, unweighted. And then once they've got that, you'll get interviewed, and then from there they'll combine in as a fourth component MMI performance, and then all that will get put together to rank people for final offers. The offer process is the same. If you're in your final year of your studies, you need to have it completed and prove that it's completed by the 31st of December in that application year. You also need to maintain your GPA, although I didn't see anything about what the requirement is about maintaining a GPA. If anyone knows it, just comment it and I'll pin it. And then if you've already finished your study, it doesn't matter. It'll be a firm offer rather than a conditional offer. One final little thing in terms of selection, they do release the data for entry. So the most recent we have on their website is for 2021 entry, people that were going into medicine last year. And they said this was at the Fremantle campus, I believe. The average GPA that got an offer was 6.54, and the average GAMSAT was 63.7 unweighted. So these are a little bit lower than what we see at some of the other unis, and this is because of the portfolio really playing into it. So I wouldn't read too far into it. Like, I looked at that and my first thought was, oh, perfect, I'm very competitive there. Even though my GPA is a bit lower, my GAMSAT can make up for it. But then you've got to remember as well that people that apply to these portfolio schools are probably going to have really strong portfolios, similar to the way that, like, I'm making use of Sydney to make up for a low GPA. So the GAMSAT scores go through the roof there, because a lot of applicants with low GPAs but really high GAMSAT scores are being attracted there. Same thing is going to be happening at UNDS and UNDF, is they're going to be attracting people that maybe don't have as strong academic results, but do have really, really strong portfolio applications. So keep that in mind, that even if you might be at or above the average for those two, you'd probably still have to have a pretty strong portfolio, because there's a lot of other unseen factors that are coming into this. The other one is MMI performance as well. Anyway, that's pretty much everything there. The timeline's all the same as the GEMSAS timeline. It all runs in line with it. So I'll leave that there to keep it nice and simple, and see you guys in the next one.